So welcome to another episode of Cyber Oinks. Today we're doing 12 hot questions for cyber experts, where we try to learn the truth about cybersecurity. And to put our experts on the spot a little bit, what we're doing is we're doing this in a multiple choice format, so it's clear sort of where their priorities lie. Today we have Gry Evita Sivertsen. Did I say that right?
Yes, very good.
All right. So she's the COO at Gritera Security. Right now, she has had security roles in the past, several of them. But one I'd like to point out, because it's close to heart, is that she spent 6 years as the head of information security at a SaaS company, which I appreciate being a SaaS leader myself. Now, Gry, you're an expert at ISO 27000. I've seen some of your posts about ISO 20000. I think you're doing a great job raising awareness about the standard and why it's important for companies and for business leaders. And with over 10,000 followers on LinkedIn, I think, you have a reach, you're really making an impact. So it's great to have you here today.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here.
So just out of curiosity, when you were coming in, to the office and then to the podcast, what was you going on through your mind?
Just that I was excited. It's always nice to talk about these topics, spread awareness. It's also the reason why I'm active on LinkedIn, to spread out the message, get the awareness going.
Cool. All right. So shall we get right into it?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. So I'll just sort of give you an idea about the rules of the game. The way it works is I'll ask a question. I'll give you options, basically, right? And you basically choose one, and you maybe tell us a little bit about what your reasoning is, why you think that's sort of the way we should go about things. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. So before we get into it, let's do a warm-up question. I always do this to make sure my guests actually understand the rules. So the first question, a warm-up question, is, if you had to pick, which would you do? Would you watch a full game of lacrosse or a UFC fight?
A full game of lacrosse.
And why?
Because I don't think I enjoy watching fighting.
Okay, cool. All right, so we did the test. We're good to go. All right, so my first question is about, the topic of BYOD and managed devices. Would you say that the way to go for security management is to have a strong BYOD policy that's enforceable, or a managed devices only? Which of these approaches wins from your perspective?
If I had to choose, I would say managed devices, because you'll have better control and better security. Of course, it can depend, and a strong BYOD policy can, of course, be good, but it needs so much more additional assessments and consideration. So if I had to choose, I would say managed devices.
Cool, thank you. Now, when it comes to cybersecurity, one of those sort of mantras about cybersecurity, any cyber person you talk to will always tell you it's about people, process, and technology, right?
Yeah.
Now, my question is, which of these do you think organizations need to focus on the most?
Of course, they're all very important, but if I had to choose, I would say people, because people are both the weakest link, but they're also the strongest defense. And it's also the people that will be working with the technology and in accordance with the processes.
Okay. Now, I have maybe one additional question is, since it's about people, where do you think organizations need to start? What's sort of what's a good way, a practical way of adopting a people-oriented sort of cybersecurity culture?
It's about showing that it is a priority. Awareness is, of course, important. But the main thing may be that good integration into daily routines and operation, to show that it really is a focus, and training then on how they can adapt it into their working activities.
All right. Okay. Now, talking about, making cybersecurity priority in organizations. One of the ways a lot of companies work these days is they have an MSP, and they kind of sort of outsource. The way they see it is they outsource their IT stuff on the MSP, and they expect them to basically have their back when it comes to cybersecurity. Now, what sometimes happens is the MSP doesn't actually see cybersecurity as their responsibility. And my question is pretty simple in this case. Is this your perception of the world as well? Do you have that experience as well?
Yeah, I've encountered this several times, and I do agree that it's a misconception. So while MSPs can give you the tools and functionalities that you're gonna need for security, you need someone in your organization to take lead to ensure that it's actually configured, that it's implemented, and also seeing the broader picture. We're just talking about people, process, technology. And so the same goes here. It's also about adapting it into the processes, good routines, and about training the people to properly use it.
So maybe one additional question to this. Do you think that it's more the companies that need to change and adopt, I guess, more responsibility when it comes to cybersecurity? And or, I guess this isn't really a multiple choice anymore. Is it, do MSPs need to change as well, you think?
I think they need to be very transparent, showing the shared responsibility model, what they're taking lead of, what they're expecting their customers to take lead and responsibility for, and to kind of also help avoid that misconception.
Got it. Okay. Since we're talking about priorities, one big thing is prevention, detection, response. I picked out two of these. Which one do you think companies need to master first, prevention or response?
Prevention first. But of course, response is crucial, but prevention first.
And why is that?
To limit the likelihood and better avoid that incidents first do occur, so minimize the likelihood of anything happening.
Thank you. We talked about this a little bit, I guess, when talking about people, process, and technology. But one sort of specific topic in this space is education, right? We hear a lot about education. And I'm curious to get your opinion about sort of education versus technology. Which do you think needs to take the lead when it comes to strengthening an organization's cyber defenses?
I would say education. So the technology can fail if people are not using it properly or right. So you need to see the bigger picture here as well. So beyond the technology itself. So I would say education.
Now, if we look at the other side of things, the technology, ransomware has become a major threat. My question is, to basically battle ransomware, do you think we need to innovate more, or is it more about optimizing the way we use existing tech to combat this sort of surge of ransomware breaches?
Yeah, I would say to prioritize to optimize first, and also with the advancement, as you're saying, with AI, to ensure that you're staying on track and adapting your business to meet the changes in the threat landscape.
Mm-hmm. On the topic of ransomware, this is kind of a hard one, I think. Should organizations not pay, or does it depend on the situation?
Tough one. Can depend on the situation, but if I had to say, I would say not pay. And because this can just fuel more attacks, and even if you do pay, there is no guarantee that you will get your data back. So,
by the way, this is just sort of a side note from my side. The likelihood of getting attacked again significantly increases after paying, basically, right? Because you basically show willingness to pay. So so yeah. But on the other hand, sometimes companies do get into situations that it's like, okay, we haven't prepared for this. What are we going to do?
Yeah. And then we're back to prevention first.
Yep.
Ready.
Absolutely. So, for those customers or for those companies that are working with MSPs, in case, and in case it's not, this is not really about the legislative aspect of everything and not about the contractual part of things, but more about sort of responsibility and accountability. In case of a breach, who should pay? Should it be the MSP that is serving the customer to protect their stuff, or should it be the customer? Or is it maybe a more complicated question? Leave that up to you.
Let's see. I think it really depends on the root cause of the breach, but I would assume that in most cases, it would be the customer that should pay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And why is that?
Because most likely it's their use of the technology, maybe how they've trained their people using it, or not having sophisticated or strong enough processes around to manage. But the root cause here is so important to actually analyze and see the cause to why it happened.
Yep. But I guess it does come back to what you were saying before, which is customers need to accept that it's their business and it's their responsibility, therefore, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Another topic that is quite close to heart, password policies. How frequently should passwords be changed?
I'm one of those that say strong and long passwords and, of course, two-factor authentication over rapid changes. And I think so because if you're forced to constantly change your password, often the trend is that you're just, for instance, adding an extra number to the end. You're not really making more secure passwords. In addition, if you constantly need to change, it becomes harder to remember, and then often people will find unsecure ways to store their passwords.
Mm-hmm.
So not too often, but strong and enforce strong and complex passwords.
Okay. Now, this is another thing people do is they take their passwords, and I guess, they're enforced to do that, or encouraged, to do that when there's a password policy that requires a lot of change. It's hard to remember. It's hard to use. They reuse those passwords on other platforms that are totally out of scope of the system, right? Of the information security system. Now, in case they do that, and it leads to a breach, whose fault is it?
Ooh. Well, it does depend. So if the organization has clear guidelines in place, has informed that this is not to be done, and the employees have accepted to these guidelines, then it's the fault of the employee. If no one has told them or informed them about the potential threat by doing this, then I would say it's on the organization.
Okay, thank you. Now the last question, just coming up to these sort of big topics that we hear a lot about. AI, and more specifically AI tools. Do you see AI as being something or more of a force for good, or do you see that the future will hold more risk coming out of AI?
I think it's no choice, because cyber criminals will be using this technology to further advance their attacks. So if we're going to be able to continuously protect ourselves, we also need to adapt and use this technology.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's got to be both, basically.
Yes.
All right, got it. So I want to thank you for answering the questions. You did a great job, and I think it's going to help people sort of wrap their minds about cybersecurity. Before we wrap up, could you maybe share some advice that you could give to SMBs, especially because those are the guys that are typically not, taking care of themselves when it comes to cyber hygiene?
Yeah.
What should they prioritize? What's your advice?
To understand that in order to focus on security is to not go big or go home. Take the time to really understand the context of your organization, understand the information that you have that gives you the most value, and find these easy measures and ways to adapt and ensure that you're protecting your assets. Really assess based on your context and what makes sense, and take the appropriate measures to protect yourself. And don't just be looking around at all these huge corporations and how they're potentially managing security, thinking you have to do the same to focus on security, because there's so many ways to do it, and often simple controls can create a lot of value.
That is great advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For anyone listening, make sure to tune in for future episodes. I will be talking to other cyber leaders and get their opinions about some of the cybersecurity topics we discussed today. I'll see you later. Thanks, Gry.
Thank you.